Moments of Truth with Andrew Marks, co-founder of Success Hacker. Today, I'm quite excited to have with me one of my good friends and colleagues who, by the way, insisted on this background rather than my normal background. Melinda Gonzalez, Vice President of Customer Success at WeWork. Melinda, I know all about you, but why don't you tell the viewers a bit about yourself and your experience and your twisted sense of humor?
Well, that last part actually might be why we're such good friends, Andrew. I thank you. Thank you for the backdrop. I really enjoyed the backdrop. I was kind of hoping there might be, maybe it'll inspire a surprise visit from Brad Pitt. Who knows? We'll see what happens. Nice to be here, and thanks for having me on today. I really appreciate it. As Andrew mentioned, my name is Melinda Gonzalez, and I joined WeWork as of a year ago. Today, the anniversary. And, really joined to try to introduce customer success into a space as a service industry, which is very new for me. I consider myself to be a lifelong learner, and I'm constantly looking for new challenges. So that's what brought me there. Prior to WeWork, I had my own practice, working with small, mid-sized, privately held usually companies, trying to go public and helping them understand what customer success and customer experience should look like within their companies. And then prior to that, I was with Salesforce for 10 years, building out customer success strategy, operations, launched a Net Promoter at Salesforce, and just spent a lot of time having great experiences there.
So, Melinda, let's talk about product and how important it is to have the product team aligned with customer success. What's your perspective on that and your experience been like?
Well, I've definitely seen very different versions of product and customer success alignments, both within companies and working with clients. But just for context, I share the story about my early days at Salesforce. I joined Salesforce as a customer success manager in 2004, and this was back in the day when Salesforce was actually still doing their 3 times a year release cycle, but they didn't have any infrastructure around or process around communicating those releases to customers. And in one event, it resulted in a pretty negative impact for one of our largest customers. And at that point, they decided to invest in a function dedicated entirely to customer release readiness. And that's actually when I moved out of the customer success organization and into the product organization to actually launch that function for the business. And while I saw the product managers and GMs as my direct customers, I was very much and my team was very much a liaison and a bridge between product and all of the customer-facing organizations that support customers through release cycles. So that story is really what I harken back to, because it was my first exposure at the impacts that you can have when you do drive product and customer success alignments. And in my time there, I was in that role for about 3 years. During that time, we launched a number of initiatives, one very focused around just creating a machine for customer release readiness, which started with getting the information from product managers on what was actually going to be released, and then having a mechanism for how we were going to distill that core information into various forms of assets for customers, whether that be online training, whether that be webinar content, whether that be talk tracks for customer success managers to share in their upcoming business reviews. So that would be one example of a kind of programmatic function that we put in place that happened on a cadence. So it happened 3 times a year, obviously, along with the release cycles. And then another example on the flip side of that was when we launched the Idea Exchange. The Idea Exchange became Salesforce's first attempt at gathering voice of the customer in a public fashion. What many may not know is that project was actually born out of a cost savings initiative. At the time, Salesforce was collecting feature requests through the support call center, and that's costly. And so we launched the Idea Exchange over the course of a couple of years and ended up distilling that information into bite-sized and digestible chunks of information for product managers. And we pushed that back into the release planning cycles so that they could consume that along with the rest of the information that they were collecting.
I loved the idea exchange, not just to communicate with Salesforce, but we rolled out idea exchange when I was at Intact, one of the early customer success organizations outside of Salesforce, and idea exchange was a great tool. We love that tool.
Yeah, it really is a great tool. I think it's also, very scalable. I really love the community aspect of it, and just thinking about the product and customer success alignment. I think the common challenge that you hear is the dynamic where customer success managers are essentially just lobbing kind of feature requests and customer requests over the fence over to the product team. And then it creates this kind of dynamic where, customer success is trying to get things done. The product team doesn't really have a really great way to distill and digest that information into actionable data and insights. And so when we actually launched the Idea Exchange, we talked about unlocking the customer voice for product managers so that they could get direct access to that and directly interface with customers and dialogue with them about what their needs were.
And this goes for a situation where they're using an Idea Exchange or you don't have that type of, even if you don't have that type of technology, as a customer success manager, you don't want to just go to product with a feature request. Having some context around what it is, not just what the customer's asking for, but why they're asking for it and what kind of effect it can have on their business is so important. You've got to sell the product team on that, and it's a good best practice when you are getting those types of requests from customers, that you're practicing things like the 5 whys type of technique. So you're getting down to the root of what are you trying to achieve here. That way I can approach product with a full story of what's behind the ask.
Absolutely. And I think that's a really, good point. It's as we think about kind of the soft skills involved in customer success engagements and customer engagements, CSMs really need to learn and understand how to have those conversations. I think you do also have to start with a customer-oriented product team. So hopefully, that's a given, but I have seen situations where, you don't necessarily have a super customer-focused product leader. And one specific instance, I actually was leading a customer success team that was trying to previously give the product team information around what was happening with customers and what the requests were. And they were going through the typical exercise of distilling that information and mapping it to ARR, an actual, revenue for the company. And, ultimately the product leader felt like they were in the best position to determine what was best for releases and felt that the customer success team was really just trying to sell more. So there's definitely a conversation to be had around ensuring that the leaders on both sides and in the other parts of the organization are really aligned and focused on what's most important, which is the customer. But it's not as easy sometimes when you don't have the infrastructure in place to make sure that that information around customer insights is being distributed effectively.
And that's what you were doing at Salesforce. You would put together that infrastructure. You put together these programs.
Yes.
That were designed for that, because it's a combination. To your point, it's a combination not just of the actual program itself, but also the soft skills and the interface that customer success, how you interface with product. You can have all the greatest programs mapped out to, the infinite level, but if you don't have the soft skills and the approach down, it takes both pieces, right?
Absolutely. And I think that, look, I'm realistic that, at that time, having an entirely dedicated customer release readiness function, I recognize that that's not necessarily an investment that every company is at a place where they can make. Salesforce was at the time. And this was still when, process wasn't really a commonly used word at the company. And so, but I still rely on those types of techniques to bring them to the table in situations where I feel like they are effective. So, in my current role leading a customer success team, I work directly with the head of product marketing to do something similar around customer release readiness, because what was happening prior, given that they didn't have a lot of process or infrastructure or communication practices around it, the releases, frankly, were a surprise to CSMs and they were a surprise to customers. And so that's really the last type of experience that you want to deliver when you're releasing new features. You want, I can go on and on about how emotions are very much tied to customer experience and customers' purchasing behavior, but you want it to be a positive experience. You want customers feeling like they were fully supported through that process, and ensuring that customer success managers are prepared with the right information and the right talking points well in advance is one really great way of doing that.
But it's the same situation that you had at Salesforce, except it's just a different technology, or it's a different business model. So at Salesforce, you did that role where you moved into product. When was that? Like 2005? How long were you had been there before you moved into that role?
I joined in 2004, and
right?
then I moved into the product organization in 2007.
Okay, so 12 years ago, 13 years ago, you had this problem, right? 13 years ago, you had this problem. Fast forward.
The problem still exists.
Exactly. That's my point. Fast forward to WeWork, January 2019, it's the same problem, just a different company, just a different logo, right?
It is. And I'm not a fan of, rinse and repeat. I think one of the things that I personally thrive on learning, and I get bored very quickly. So I regularly seek out roles where there are significant challenges at hand. But that being said, and of course I come up with new innovative solutions for the current situation, but there are absolutely things that you can still pull from your toolbox that apply to any new situation.
There's absolutely no shame in pulling out of your past. That's, as a matter of fact, that's why anybody in their right mind would hire someone with experience, because you've got a lot of this experience. It doesn't mean that you're gonna, rinse and repeat really isn't a realistic visualization of what happens. It's, hey, I've seen something like this before. This is how I approached it. I wonder if I can use some of these tools, some of these thoughts, some of these programs, some of these approaches that I've had experience with before and had a positive experience with, and apply it to my current situation, which is the beauty of having some experience like we have. Yeah.
Definitely. Yeah. I think, another example that I can give in the same vein would be similar to just, again, driving alignment and understanding between product and customer success. The last thing that you want to do is you don't want to have customer success managers and product management feeling like they're kind of on a different page about adoption, like fundamental adoption questions. And so there would be another instance where the product team wasn't actually instrumenting the product to capture utilization metrics, which, as a sidebar, I think is something that I absolutely took for granted at Salesforce. And when I left Salesforce and started working with a lot of other companies, I recognized not all companies either have the resources, luxury, or mindset to do that. And that is foundational in making sure that both functions are talking the same language when it comes to adoption. So in that instance, again, I worked with the analytics product leader in the organization to actually start instrumenting the product for key features and areas of the product that were important to us. And then we rolled that out to the customer success organization. And actually, it gave them a way to actually prepare better for customer conversations, and became a phenomenal voice of customer tool for us to share back with product management, that product management felt was reliable, directly from the customers, and data oriented.
These days, it's all about the data, right? Data tells such stories. If I'm just talking about how are people using my solution, and that's just core. That's got to be a core part of your infrastructure.
I completely agree. And I think, I mean, I wholeheartedly agree with you. I think I also just want to leave a little door open for just, resourcing that effort. If you are, an early stage startup, you might not have the resources for that. Or you might decide from the get-go that product and utilization and instrumenting the product for that are absolutely um, deal breakers for moving forward with the product. So, this would be an experience for me where I would now go forward into other scenarios and actually use that as a little bit of a litmus test to determine how customer centric a product organization is. Because in my experience, developing product, putting it out there, and not necessarily looking for the data to understand what customers are using, to me is a huge blind spot. We could probably go down a rabbit hole with just my own philosophical thinking on this, but personally, I think the same way that you think about a salesperson's compensation and how part of it is based on the variable comp, and that variable comp can be tied to obviously quota, net new sales, or retention, whatever that looks like. I would I would love to see another person come on to this show and talk about a similar compensation model for product managers where part of their compensation is actually based on product adoption.
Yeah, I love that idea. I think I personally, I think part of sales comp also needs to be tied to product adoption. But I love the idea of product having a variable piece of their component tied to adoption.
Yeah, and I think you could probably obviously that's the whole other conversation around designing a comp plan for a product manager, but I think you could certainly provide some leeway for products that you're launching that are very early stage that maybe customers aren't asking for, but they're trailblazing products that may not get adopted as quickly. I don't know. There's definitely ways that you could adjust those comp plans to make them fair and equitable, but I don't know that there are companies. I've never run into a company who's doing that, but I long to see a company doing that at some point.
You long to see a company doing that?
I think that would be true innovation, actually compensating product managers on adoption of product.
Well, I like it because it's not just about it forces them to be customer centric. It hopefully drives a better user experience. It also hopefully drives that desire to understand what customers want, what customers need, what customers
Absolutely.
are asking for, and respond to it, and not fall back on what's is commonly referred to as the Henry Ford effect. I know better what my customer base wants than they do.
Absolutely. That would be a great roundtable for you to broker.
It would be.
Maybe a customer success leader, a product leader, and
I know. You want to be on that?
Sure.
Great. Hey, thank you for your time. It was a great discussion about product, and I appreciate the time you spent with me today.
Thank you.